What I'm talking about more is all of the institutions of society, the non-governmental institutions of society in large part, becoming more and more intolerant of dissent, outlawing dissent, social ostracization, people losing their jobs, people having family members not speaking to them anymore. And this is leading to a complete breakdown in the possibility of us even having a republic together. It's really, really dangerous stuff. And everybody feels it. This is the part that's amazing, is that we're all being gaslit by the media that says that this stuff is not important or that, it's just making the country better. But by polling data, every single subgroup in the United States, including mainstream liberals, with the exception of far left radicals, with the exception of the far left, every single subgroup in the United States says they are afraid to say what they believe about politics publicly. That's insane. Okay, that is a good indicator of where we are and how far we have to go.
You'll be proud to know, Ben, as a refugee of Los Angeles, that, we have this mask mandate in effect again. And I went to a restaurant this weekend, I went to Home Depot this weekend, and I went to a mall this weekend, and I did not wear a mask. And guess what? An awful lot of people nodded at me, in support. A lot of people were not wearing masks. And yes, when I went into Bloomingdale's and they asked me to put the mask on, I did, because I'm not trying to, get somebody fired or get into a fight with somebody. But I bring it up because enough people are sort of like, okay, it is time to move on. And that's just where we're at the moment. Yeah,
well, again, I moved to Florida, and I will tell you this. If they try this whole vaccinated need to mask up again, nobody's doing it. Like, people weren't doing it originally here. And I can't imagine that people are going to do it here. And again, Governor DeSantis has been very big on everybody should get the vaccine if you are physically able to get the vaccine. And there's not much more than that he can do. And I got to say, just on a data level, I'm bewildered by this. I was looking at the 7-day running average of death from COVID. The average number of deaths from COVID, according to the New York Times, 7-day rolling average right now, is 269. Okay, when we were at the height of the pandemic, it was well over 3,000 people a day who were dying. So we brought down that factor by a factor of 10. Okay, we are now seeing fewer people die every day in the United States from COVID than die on a normal day from diabetes.
Right, okay, and 269, I mean, are they giving us ages on that or other health, the comorbidity stuff? Because that's a very small number. Of course, we don't want people to die, but it's a small number.
Well, I mean, again, if you are going to talk about public health crises, then you really do have to talk about the number of people who are dying and the number of people who are being hospitalized. And the fact that the media will do things like play with stats where they'll say, well, we've had a 40% increase in the number of hospitalized from 3 weeks ago. And it's like, yes, but the number of hospitalized 3 weeks ago was very, very low. Like a 40% increase means we are still very, very low. So this doesn't mean that we're making light of any of this sort of stuff. What it does mean is that statistically speaking, the people who are getting serious breakthrough infections have significant underlying illnesses, very significant underlying illnesses. And the people who are mostly getting hospitalized and the people who are dying tend to be people who are unvaccinated. And that really resides in sort of the middle section of the age range of the population, because dirty little secret, pretty much everybody who's over the age of 65 in this country got the vaccine.
Yeah, Ben, I'm not a mathematician like you are, but if there's one person who had COVID and then the next week there's two, what's the percent increase on that?
Yeah, it's a 100% increase, right?
My God, that's a huge, huge increase. All right, well, all of this leads us perfectly to the authoritarian moment, because it does seem like we are in it right now. Are you sort of having a pat yourself on the back moment? Because I've been feeling that a little bit lately. Like, we were in a group of people that were screaming about all of this about 5 years ago. Not to say there weren't plenty of people doing it before that, but like, we were really on the internet like front end of like, guys, this horrible thing is here, and everyone kept saying, no, it's just on college campuses, and now it has burst forth for everyone to see.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I used to think, as a religious Jew, there's a whole take on prophecy that prophecy is like God speaking through you. But I tend to think now that prophecy is more along my Maimonidean lines, just seeing very clearly what's happening right now. I think the reason that Orwell's 1984 is prophetic is not because it was prophecy. It's because he was actually describing a thing that was happening in the Soviet Union at the time. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at things happening elsewhere, like, wow, how could he have foreseen? He wasn't foreseeing anything. He was literally describing what's going on, 5 years ago, and then looking what's happening. And it was a smaller phenomenon then. It's a much larger phenomenon now. And I don't think any of us were prophets. I think that we just all saw clearly what was happening and the direction that people were moving. And the authoritarianism that I talk about in the book is really not the government top-down authoritarianism that we've worried about in the past, the idea the government is going to tell you what to do, although that may be the natural outgrowth of a sort of attitudinal authoritarianism that's taken over. What I'm talking about more is all of the institutions of society, the non-governmental institutions of society in large part, becoming more and more intolerant of dissent, outlawing dissent, social ostracization, people losing their jobs, people having family members not speaking to them anymore. And this is leading to a complete breakdown in the possibility of us even having a republic together. It's really, really dangerous stuff. And everybody feels it. This is the part that's amazing, is that we're all being gaslit by the media that says that this stuff is not important or that, it's just making the country better. But by polling data, every single subgroup in the United States, including mainstream liberals, with the exception of far left radicals, with the exception of the far left, every single subgroup in the United States says they are afraid to say what they believe about politics publicly. That's insane. Okay, that is a good indicator of where we are and how far we have to go.
What do you make of the last liberals at this point? I mean, do you consider them part of a new conservative movement or some sort of wide tent thing on the right? I mean, that's what I would say. I'm not talking about, obviously, the crazy lefties, but the last few, the Sam Harrises, the Barry Weisses, whoever else is left. Like, what do you make of that crew at this point?
I mean, so frankly, I think that the future of the country rests on them, because I think that the folks in the middle are going to have to make a decision. There are a lot of sort of mainstream establishment liberals who have a decision to make. The decision is this. They can either move along with the hardcore left with whom they agree on policy a lot of the time, and they can get their left-wing utopia at the expense of individual rights, comedy, having a country, or they can say to the radical left, look, we may agree with you on a lot of your policy prescriptions, but the way you're going about this is going to break the country, and we need to have these discussions with people on the right. We need to preserve individual rights. And if it takes us longer to get where we're going, or maybe even if we don't get there at all, the higher principles are still worth standing up for. I am unsure of which way the establishment liberals are going to go, because you do see things like the Harper's letter with 150 liberal intellectuals saying that they are very much in favor of individual rights. It would have been nice to see one Trump supporter on that list. It would also be nice to know really whether mainstream establishment liberals are interested in opening the Overton window wider than themselves. In other words, are they saying we don't like cancel culture for us, or are they saying we don't like cancel culture even for people with whom we disagree? So today on Twitter, I put out sort of a challenge, maybe called the Nice Bucket Challenge. But the basic challenge is, if you are a person in politics, can you name and publicly say about somebody who voted differently than you that they're a nice person? Can you say that? Because the answer for a lot of folks on the left is no. The answer for a lot of, and I'm including mainstream liberals there, people who just will not treat you as a human being publicly. They won't come out and say publicly, I disagree with this person on nearly everything. They're a nice person, and you should read their stuff and consider it. You say that kind of crap all the time. I say that all the time. I literally refer people to left-wing podcasts and say you should listen to them and listen to me and then decide who you agree with. I've never heard of a left-wing podcast that has suggested anything remotely similar about my own.
Ben, because you're a Nazi.
Right.
Duh. Right. I mean, that's how it works.
Always, yep.
Yeah, I hate to tell you that I think I can give you the conclusion on your hypothesis here, which is that they're not for the most part going to move in the direction you want them to move. I don't think they'll necessarily move towards the left anymore, but they'll stay in this sort of irrelevant limbo phase, because I've met and I know a lot of these people, and they just, more than anything else, more than saving the country, they just don't want to be called conservatives, because you guys are very scary. You guys are very, very scary.
It's a real problem, and it's why I opened the book by talking about January 6th, because I think that there's a trick that's being played right now, and it's why the Democrats are trying to do the January 6th Commission, make a big deal out of January 6th. Listen, January 6th was a big deal, but it was a big deal because law enforcement failed to stop a couple of hundred idiots from running into the Capitol building. The notion that it was a full-scale assault on democracy that was going to end with the overthrow of our democracy, the worst democratic situation since the Civil War, in the words of many of the Democrats.
Wait a minute. AOC said that we were an hour away from armed insurrection, or we were an hour away from martial law, is what she said.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, it's totally and utterly insane. What I pose at the beginning of the book is a basic question. Let me give you two realities, okay? One is we have January 6th. It's an act of evil by a bunch of idiots who are going to be arrested and go to jail. Then we have an entire left wing that labels the entire right wing responsible for January 6th, starts suggesting overt social controls with regard to media, with regard to free speech, starts deplatforming places like Parler, using neutral service providers like Amazon Web Services, starts openly moving to push social media to ban people like mainstream conservative voices, starts talking to corporations about how they're not allowed to give anymore to members of the Republican Party who didn't vote the way they wanted them to vote on certification of the election without actually overthrowing the election, right? Which one is more authoritarian? A bunch of idiots running into the Capitol building and then getting themselves arrested, or every major institution in America declaring January 6th such an unbelievable crisis that they have to maximize their power over your life? I mean, it seems to me that there's a wild imbalance in the amount of institutional support from one authoritarian ideal versus the other.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.